The orbital station of Aliramis loomed above the azure seas of my homeworld like a second moon, its silver spires glinting under the pale light of our twin suns. I stood on the docking platform, my tail swaying with restless energy, and gazed at the human transport ship that would carry me across the stars. It looked strange to me, its bulky frame and angular armor plates so different from the sleek, graceful ships of my people. It seemed hewn from a mountain rather than built in the vacuum of space. This was to be my first journey beyond the Aliramis system, my first steps toward enlisting in the Interstellar Assembly's forces. A choice my matron had called bold, even reckless. "You'll be surrounded by strangers," she had warned. "Some will see you as a curiosity, others a threat. Humans, especially." She had trailed off, her expression unreadable. "But perhaps you will thrive among them." I inhaled deeply, savoring the faint tang of ozone that permeated the station. Aliramis' atmosphere was sharp and vibrant, filled with scents that could only come from a death world. I would miss it, the warmth of my matron's wisdom, the familiar laughter of my pack, and the soothing chants of the dawn chorus. But this was my path. The assembly needed warriors, and the galaxy needed peacekeepers. My people had a saying: "The sharpest fang is honed in silence, not comfort." The human ship's boarding ramp lowered with a metallic hiss, and my ears twitched at the sound of heavy boots echoing against the platform. A group of humans disembarked, their movements deliberate and confident. They wore simple uniforms, helmets tucked under their arms, and their eyes, small, intense, and unsettlingly direct, scanned the gathered passengers, pausing briefly on me. I flicked my tail, straightened my flowing robes, and met their gaze with calm determination. I had studied their culture extensively in preparation for this journey. Humanity was a contradiction in motion, reckless yet methodical, destructive yet fiercely protective. Unlike most species in the assembly, they clung stubbornly to their traditions and ways of thinking. They preferred railguns to plasma weapons, armor plating to shield generators. Their ships were flying fortresses, built for war rather than elegance. And yet, they were survivors, products of Earth, their Class 6 death world. Their history was one of conflict, hardship, and triumph. They fascinated and unsettled me in equal measure. "Passengers for the assembly station, prepare to board," a human voice called out, amplified by a translator device. The tone was clipped and authoritative. I adjusted the strap of my satchel, its contents carefully chosen. A ceremonial blade, a small hollow projector with images of my pack, and a handwritten journal. My claws clicked softly against the metal floor as I stepped forward, joining the line of passengers. The human officer standing at the ramp gave me a curt nod. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. I nodded in return, suppressing the urge to bare my teeth in a friendly gesture. I had learned that humans did not interpret such expressions as welcoming. Their bodies lacked the subtle communication cues of my own kind. No flick of the ears, no swish of the tail. Words were their primary tools, crude and often insufficient. Inside, the ship was dimly lit and utilitarian. The corridors were narrow, the walls lined with exposed conduits and reinforced bulkheads. I felt a pang of longing for the open, sunlit spaces of Aliramis. But I reminded myself of my purpose. Discipline and mercy, I thought, repeating the mantra my matron had taught me. Pragmatism and strength. As I found my assigned quarters, the low hum of the ship's engines deepened, signaling our impending departure. I settled onto the small, rigid cot, my ears swiveling to catch the faint vibrations of the hull. The journey to the assembly station would take 2 months, a long time to adapt to human company and their peculiar ways. I closed my eyes, envisioning the path ahead. The assembly's forces were a melting pot of species and cultures, each bringing their strengths to the table. I would be one among many, yet my instincts told me that humans would leave an indelible mark on my experience. They thrived in chaos, in the face of danger and conflict. Perhaps, in time, I would understand why. The ship shuddered as it broke free of the station's docking clamps. I felt the subtle shift of artificial gravity as we accelerated into the void. My tail curled around my ankles, a gesture of self-comfort. I whispered a quiet prayer to the huntress, the guardian spirit of my people, asking for guidance and strength. The stars outside the viewport stretched into streaks of light, and Aliramis grew smaller, until it was just a shimmering speck among countless others. My journey had begun. The hum of the ship's engines became a constant presence, a low, steady vibration that resonated through the walls and into my bones. It was a sound unlike anything I had experienced on Aliramis, where the air was filled with the rustle of wind through crystalline trees and the distant calls of winged predators. Here, the only sounds were mechanical, the clang of boots on metal, the hiss of air recyclers, and the occasional murmur of human voices. My quarters were small, barely large enough to accommodate my frame. The cot was rigid, the walls unadorned, and the single viewport offered a stark view of the void. I had expected as much. Human ships were not designed for comfort, but the starkness still unsettled me. I missed the warmth of my pack's den, the soft glow of bioluminescent plants, and the scent of fresh rain on stone. I unpacked my satchel carefully, laying out my few possessions on the narrow shelf above the cot. The ceremonial blade, a gift from my matron, gleamed faintly in the dim light. Its hilt was carved with the symbols of my lineage, a reminder of who I was and where I came from. The hollow projector came next, its soft light casting images of my pack into the air. I lingered on one. A group of us gathered around a fire, our tales intertwined as we shared stories under the twin suns. The ache of homesickness was sharp, but I pushed it aside. This was my choice, my path. A knock at the door startled me. My ears twitched, and I turned to see a human standing in the doorway. She was tall, her uniform neatly pressed, and her dark hair pulled back into a tight braid. Her eyes, a deep brown, studied me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You're the new recruit," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "I'm Lieutenant Mara Voss. Welcome to the Ironclad." I inclined my head, a gesture of respect. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I am Kale of the Aliramis pack." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "The captain wants to see you. Follow me." I fell into step behind her, my claws clicking softly against the metal floor. The corridors were narrow, forcing me to walk with my tail tucked close to my body. Humans passed us, their eyes flicking toward me with varying degrees of interest and wariness. I kept my gaze forward, my ears swiveling to catch snippets of their conversations. "Is that the alien?" one whispered. "Looks like a predator," another muttered. I ignored them, focusing instead on Lieutenant Voss's steady stride. She led me to a door at the end of the corridor, which slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the captain's quarters were slightly larger than mine, though no less utilitarian. A man sat behind a desk, his uniform adorned with the insignia of the Interstellar Assembly. His hair was streaked with gray, and his face bore the lines of someone who had seen too much. "Captain Elias Grant," he said, rising to his feet. "You must be Kale." "I am," I replied, inclining my head again. He gestured to a chair. "Sit. We have much to discuss." I obeyed, my tail curling around the base of the chair. Captain Grant studied me for a moment, his gaze piercing. "You're the first of your kind to join the Assembly's forces," he said. "That makes you a trailblazer, but it also makes you a target. Not everyone here will welcome you with open arms." "I understand," I said, my voice steady. "I did not come here expecting ease." He nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Good. The Assembly needs warriors like you, those who are willing to face the unknown. But you'll need to prove yourself not just to me, but to the crew. Humans can be skeptical of outsiders." "I will earn their trust," I said firmly. Captain Grant leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "See that you do. In the meantime, Lieutenant Voss will show you around. Get familiar with the ship, the crew, and our protocols. We'll reach the assembly station in 2 months. Until then, consider this your home." The days aboard the Ironclad passed slowly. I spent much of my time observing the humans, learning their habits and routines. They were a disciplined group, their days structured around drills, maintenance, and briefings. But there was an undercurrent of tension, a wariness that I couldn't quite place. Lieutenant Voss became my guide, showing me the ship's systems and introducing me to the crew. Some were polite, if distant, while others made no effort to hide their distrust. One human, a burly engineer named Jax, seemed particularly hostile. "Don't see why we need aliens on this ship," he muttered during one of our encounters. "We've managed just fine without them." I held his gaze, my tail flicking in irritation. "The assembly is stronger when we work together," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He snorted but said nothing more. It was a small victory, but I knew it would take more than words to win him over. The real test came during a training exercise. The crew gathered in the ship's simulation chamber, a vast room that could replicate any environment. Captain Grant stood at the front, his arms crossed. "Today's exercise is simple," he said. "Survive." The room shifted, the walls dissolving into a dense jungle. The air grew humid, and the sounds of unseen creatures filled the space. The crew scattered, forming small groups to navigate the terrain. I stayed close to Lieutenant Voss, my senses on high alert. It wasn't long before the first challenge appeared. A simulated predator, its eyes glowing with artificial intelligence. It lunged at us, and I reacted instinctively, my claws slashing through its holographic form. The crew stared at me, their expressions a mix of awe and unease. "Nice reflexes," Voss said, her tone approving. But the exercise wasn't over. The jungle shifted again, and a new threat emerged. A swarm of drones, their weapons trained on us. This time, it was the humans' turn to shine. Their coordination was flawless, their movements precise as they took down the drones one by one. By the end of the exercise, we were exhausted but victorious. Captain Grant approached me, a rare smile on his face. "Not bad, Cale," he said. "You might just fit in here after all." The training exercise marked a turning point. While some of the crew remained wary, others began to see me not as an outsider, but as a potential ally. Lieutenant Voss, in particular, seemed to warm to me. She often sought me out during downtime, her questions about my culture and upbringing genuine rather than probing. "Your people are hunters, right?" she asked one evening as we sat in the mess hall. The room was sparsely populated, the hum of the ship's engines a constant backdrop. "We are," I replied, my tail flicking in amusement. "Though we prefer the term predators. It's more accurate." She chuckled, a sound that was surprisingly warm. "Predators, then. What's it like, living on a death world?" "I've read the reports, but they don't do it justice." I hesitated, considering her question. "It's intense. Every day is a test of survival. The air is thick with the scent of danger, and the land itself seems alive, always shifting, always challenging you. But it's also beautiful. The twin suns paint the sky in colors you've never seen, and the forests are filled with creatures that defy imagination." Voss leaned forward, her interest evident. "Sounds like Earth, in a way. Before we ruined it, I mean." I tilted my head, curious. "You've been to Earth?" "Once," she said, her expression softening. "It's not the death world it used to be, but you can still see the scars. The oceans are rising, the cities are crumbling, but there's a resilience to it, like it's waiting for us to fix what we broke." Her words resonated with me. Aliramis was a harsh world, but it was also a place of incredible beauty and strength. Perhaps humans and my kind were not so different after all. The relative calm of our journey was shattered a week later. I was in my quarters when the ship's alarms blared, a harsh, grating sound that sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. My ears flattened against my skull as I bolted to my feet, my claws instinctively extending. "All hands, report to stations." Captain Grant's voice echoed through the intercom. "We've got a problem." I sprinted to the bridge, my heart pounding. The crew was already at their posts, their faces tense as they monitored the ship's systems. On the main view screen, a massive storm of ionized particles loomed ahead, its swirling colors both beautiful and terrifying. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Ion storm," Voss replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's not on any of our charts. Must have formed recently." Captain Grant's expression was grim. We can't go around it. Our only option is to go through. The crew erupted into action, their movements precise and efficient. I stood at the edge of the bridge, feeling out of place but determined to help. As the ship entered the storm, the vibrations grew more intense, the lights flickering ominously. Shields at 60% and dropping, one of the crew members shouted. Divert power from non-essential systems. Grant ordered. We need to hold the line. I stepped forward, my instincts screaming at me to do something. Captain, let me help. My people are used to navigating harsh environments. I might be able to stabilize the ship. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Do it. I moved to the navigation console, my claws tapping rapidly on the controls. The storm's patterns were chaotic, but there was a rhythm to them, a logic that I could almost grasp. I adjusted the ship's trajectory, weaving through the worst of the turbulence. Shields at 40%. The crew member called out. Hold steady. I barked, my voice sharper than I intended. The crew glanced at me, but no one argued. We were in this together now. Minutes felt like hours as we fought our way through the storm. The ship groaned under the strain, but it held. Finally, with a shuddering lurch, we emerged on the other side. The view screen cleared, revealing the calm expanse of space once more. The bridge erupted into cheers, the tension dissipating like smoke. Captain Grant turned to me, a rare smile on his face. Good work, Cale, he said. You just earned your place on this crew. The rest of the journey passed without incident. The crew's attitude toward me shifted noticeably. Even Jax, the burly engineer, gave me a grudging nod of respect. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. When we finally reached the assembly station, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The station was a marvel of engineering, its sprawling structure housing species from across the galaxy. As we docked, I caught my first glimpse of the diverse array of beings who called this place home. Lieutenant Voss stood beside me as we disembarked. Ready for the next chapter? She asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. I nodded, my tail swaying with determination. Ready. The assembly station was a sprawling metropolis of steel and light, a testament to the unity of countless species. Its corridors buzzed with activity, the air filled with the hum of alien languages and the clatter of mechanical limbs. I had never seen anything like it. The diversity was overwhelming, towering reptilians,